Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Mate. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. What a week in the world. The president, as we're recording this, is hanging on despite the revolt from the pundit class. Sleepy Joe is telling everyone to wake up because he's staying in the race.
Yeah.
And they better get on board.
You know, Aaron, you look very, very sun-kissed right now.
Yeah.
Were you inspired by Joe Biden, who clearly went to a tanning bed between the terrible debate and the next time he addressed the nation? Or is this natural?
This is natural. I did not go to a tanning salon. If anything, and let's take a moment to raise awareness. Everyone should be wearing a sun hat, a sunscreen, to keep those bad rays away.
That's true.
And we don't want to encourage bad behavior on this show. We know people turn to us for health tips, for lifestyle tips. So please wear sunscreen, everybody.
Wear sunscreen, yeah. Don't get too jealous of Aaron's very nice brown tones.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
Very kind, Katie. Yeah.
I look like powder right now.
Well,
Katie, I'm
speaking,
embracing it.
You are, and I mean, you've been fighting off COVID.
I have been, yeah.
We're grateful you're even here to join us because this is your first bout with COVID, right?
It is. I honestly thought I was immune because I lasted this long without it, but I finally got it. It finally got me, and I've been the biggest thing that I've had is just incredible fatigue. No punchline there, just a point of information in case people want to know.
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden should have tried out that excuse.
Yeah, you're right.
He has a cold and then is jet lagged, which actually we're about to get into right now. And Democrats suck because Democrats have been workshopping all these different excuses for Biden's poor debate performances. And I think they finally come up with the right combination of excuses. They're sort of putting them all together. So first, they told us during the debate, and this was the breaking news as the debate was unfolding and everybody was watching the president meltdown in real time, that breaking news, President Biden has a cold. This is what we were told, right? This is during the debate when all of a sudden this came out. Two sources familiar with the situation say President Biden has a cold, okay? But everyone mocked that because whether it's true or not that he has a cold, it can't explain such a terrible performance as he put on in the debate where he can't remember words, he can't put a sentence together. It's not quite the symptom of a cold. So then they came up with a new excuse, which was jet lag. And here is Biden campaign spokesperson Adrian Elrod trotting this out to Morning Joe.
Look, President Biden has made it very clear. How many times does he have to say it that he did not have his best night? He said it at a fundraiser last night in McLean, Virginia, that he was tired. You've noted on the show, Mika, many times that, he traveled twice around the world. He was exhausted. He did not have his best night. However, I don't know if Congressman Ryan saw this, but President Biden gave a rousing speech.
Okay, this is my favorite part of this clip. So first of all, note how they're trotting out a new excuse. The first one was that he had a cold, right? Now he's jet lagged. He was exhausted from traveling. And MSNBC, they're such state stenographers that they had this graphic prepared for when the Biden spokesperson dropped the new talking point about how he's tired because of his travels. So they're like in the control room, they're like waiting to roll out the graphic like that he's jet lagged. He's been traveling so much around the world. Then bam. Here's the travel schedule. He's in Normandy, France. Then he goes on to Italy. Then he goes to Los Angeles, presumably for a fundraiser. That's the one he did with George Clooney because he skipped Zelensky's peace summit. And then he goes back to Washington, D.C. Look at that travel schedule, right? So we're supposed to think, oh, my God, this poor president, he's so jet lagged. The problem with this is that A, first of all, again, this was not the excuse they gave us at first. It was a cold. And B, this is like more than a week before the debate.
Yeah.
So they really want us to think that he can't recover from a international travel that's more than a week old. And what does that say about his stamina and his fitness to be president?
Yeah. You think that they were like, hey, we're going to go with the travel fatigue excuse. So if you could just prep this graphic, that would be great. I wonder if they even sent them the graphic.
I'm sure they did. This probably was drafted in the White House and then MSNBC picked it up. Okay. So that's the new excuse. President Biden was tired. He was jet lagged. But the problem is they still have the old excuse of the cold. So here is Karine Jean-Pierre fusing the two excuses.
How is it that the president was still tired 12 days after returning from Europe, had a cold, but then went to the Waffle House, and then the following day staged such a huge comeback that he gave those North Carolina remarks. Like, help us understand.
Okay, wait, I just want to put something out there. This is a major plug for Waffle House because he sounded terrible, and then he went to Waffle House and then was fine.
He was reinvigorated by the Waffle House.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to know what he ordered, what he ate.
Yeah. You know, on social media, the Waffle House has been known for those videos of people fighting in the Waffle House, right? I believe we've played some before on this show, but now the Waffle House is known as pretty much a wellness center because it heals.
It is, yeah, you're right.
It heals an ailing president. It gives him the strength he needs to keep campaigning.
Or Aaron, is it a fighting spirit that he picked up in that Waffle House?
Maybe
Maybe he observed the fight and then injected him with a sense of fight. Yeah,
that's right, because he certainly is back and the reporter here makes a good point. If he has a cold and he's so shambolic during the debate, how then does he have the strength to go visit the Waffle House on his way out of the debate and then go deliver a fiery campaign speech the following day?
Yeah. Not to mention he's putting people at risk from his cold, which is a debilitating cold, according to the White House. And of course, we all know that this is a question of sundowning. People who are older and people have dementia. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I've observed this with people I know. They get tired after a certain time. And in fact, a Biden person said that his hours are from, I think, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Which is, pretty much a full workday. So,
yeah,
hey,
it is. Yeah.
I mean, do we expect anybody else to work more than 8 hours a day?
Mm-mm.
No. So then why do we expect more of just the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful nation? Yeah. But let's hear Karine Jean-Pierre's response to this.
Have you had a cold before?
Of course I've had
a cold before. So you probably, come on, Jackie. Let's be very, let's be.
12 days after he returned, though.
But
and
you
he
also,
jet lag yesterday.
Hold on a second. There's a cold, there's a jet lag. You combine that. He continues to work for the American people.
There's a cold, there's a jet lag, bam. There it is.
Well, Aaron, you have to add in the continuing to work for the American people, which also creates some wear and tear.
Yes. So that's the new excuse. There's a cold, there's a jet lag, and he's also doing his job, which means how could he possibly put a coherent sentence together in a debate against Donald J. Trump?
What? I mean, obviously the woman asking the question, Jackie, the reporter, has never had a cold.
Never had a cold. No.
Yeah. Or she'd know, or she'd understand.
Yes.
Probably the reason they couldn't try COVID is because he's gotten rid of any kind of relief for people with COVID or incorporating any sick days. Remember that they used to do that? They used to give out COVID tests for free, but since he's not doing any of that, he can't really pretend, he can't really claim to have COVID because then he would just look like an asshole.
Well, good thing they have two other solid excuses: the old cold and jet lag routine, which is pretty much bulletproof, no holes in that one, and President Biden staying in the race, everybody. So get used to it.
In case you thought that the Democrat suck was not beatable, luckily we have a great Republican suck for you today, and that comes from South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. She's being asked questions by the wonderful, fearless Medea Benjamin. Let's hear what she has to say about Gaza.
Do they pay you to do this? Or
no,
is this like
do
a
they pay you?
Effort?
How much money do you get from AIPAC? What about the rising death toll for children in Gaza? Is that something that concerns you?
I love Israel and every Jewish citizen of Israel and here in the United States.
Do you love Palestinians?
I support Israel 100%, and I hope they bomb the hell out of Hamas and wipe them off the map.
Do you love Palestinians?
Happy 4th of July.
Do you love Palestinians? Can you say that you love Palestinians? How about Palestinian Americans? Do you love them?
You didn't have your phone yesterday. What, you were
I do love Palestinian Americans.
Do they pay you to do this? Or
no,
is this like
do
a
they pay you?
Effort?
How much money do you get from AIPAC?
I wholeheartedly support Israel. 100%. Thanks, babe.
Just unbelievable. Incapable of even pretending to care about Palestinians.
Great comeback from Medea when Nancy Mace tries to trot out the whole smear tactic of suggesting she's paid by somebody, some foreign power or something. And Medea points out, well, how much are you paid on behalf of a foreign power by AIPAC? And of course, Nancy Mace doesn't answer. But Kopink does give the answer that she's received tens of thousands of dollars worth of donations from AIPAC.
61,000, I believe, is the number.
That allegation is always projection.
Right. I mean, it's just, can you imagine being a Palestinian or a Palestinian American and hearing that? they don't even pander to. I mean, they don't even pretend to care about you.
No, I mean, during the debate, Trump used it as an insult when he said to Biden, Biden's like a Palestinian. And it's a very bigoted statement, and everyone just nodded. And Biden didn't call that out as bigoted. The moderators didn't say anything. On CNN afterwards, there was no one saying that Trump made a racist statement, because anti-Palestinian racism is just normalized by all these people across the spectrum.
Right. It's so built into it. And of course, having Jake Tapper and Dana Bash as the moderators, you're not going to hear any pushback against any anti-Palestinian bigotry from them. Anyway, so that's your Republican suck. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It's just so ridiculous. Doesn't care about what's happening in Gaza. Just loves Jewish citizens of Israel. I'm glad she recognizes there's an apartheid state there, though. Basically saying that Jewish citizens are distinct from non-Jewish citizens. Her love is apartheid love.
Yeah, and Code Pink, on top of calling out the warmongers and congressional hearings and getting arrested, they also put out so many videos like this where they just ask the questions that the corporate media won't ask, calling out politicians in both parties on their hypocrisy and their double standards and their support for mass murder. And without Code Pink, we just would not get all these mask off moments from politicians putting their racism on display. So very grateful as always.
Yeah, very grateful. Yeah, it's funny because Medea's Jewish. It would have been funny if she'd asked Nancy, like, do you love me?
Well, I think Medea is the kind of Jewish person who is exempt from Nancy Mace's love, because Medea is a Jewish person who opposes mass murder. So therefore is not entitled to love from a elected politician in the Republican Party.
For Isn't That Terrible? We have something truly terrible. It's called The New Norm, and it is X, which used to be known as Twitter, X's new animated show, and it stars none other than David Rubin. Let's take a look.
What's that?
Progress. It's the new norm.
The new norm ain't the same as the old norm. I'm the old norm. I want normal beer.
Warning, perimeter reached.
Ugh. It's your fault I got house arrest.
You're the one who threatened the school board.
I gently suggested
Yelled.
They stop brainwashing my daughter that girls aren't girls and men aren't men.
Sometimes they're neither, or both, or furry and dressed like dogs.
Ow! Janice! What's that?
Warning, offensive.
Actually, that is one of my pronouns. Also they, them, and me.
You're non-binary?
How do you know that word?
I learned it in school.
That's why I'm locked up.
Norm.
Okay, all right. Well, so the shtick here is this is like an anti woke cartoon,
right? And it shows a man who's imprisoned by the woke industrial complex. He wanted a beer. For those of you just listening, he wanted a beer, but the beer can was a rainbow can, which of course is the sign of the LGBTQ agenda. And it's a great laugh track. I actually find it's terrible, but there's something hypnotic about it. I want to keep watching.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's awful. Maybe it was so awful that I found it fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't wait for it to end.
Yeah.
So we all react differently to terrible things.
Right.
But look, comedy has taken a hit in recent years. And I appreciate people are trying their best to, explore their creativity and come up with something that they think appeals to them and their audience. So, the odds are, if I'm betting, this actually might become a hit because these are the kinds of times we're in.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to Elon Musk for ushering in this new show. I guess it's like a modern day All in the Family.
Yeah, I think that's the point here.
Yeah, right.
They're trying to appeal to people who miss All in the Family. But of course, All in the Family was actually
ironic.
Yeah, it was a critique of the conservative culture that was featured in it through the main character, Archie Bunker. But I think for people who don't get that irony, I think this show is for them.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't get All in the Family, you'll love the new normal. All right, and those have been our 4 basic food groups. Very excited to be speaking to Alon Mizrahi, who joins us from Israel. He's a self-described radical Mizrahi left-wing soft anarchist. He's become a major critic of Zionism, although, of course, he was raised as a Zionist. He's written for Haaretz and Local Call, and he has a blog called easternnoke.co. You can also follow him on Twitter at Alon_Mizrahi. And something that people should know is Alon Mizrahi is himself Mizrahi. Mizrahi is refers to Jews who come from the Middle East, Arab countries, Muslim countries, as opposed to Ashkenazi Jews who come from Eastern Europe and Sephardic Jews who come from Spain and North Africa. A lot of what he talks about will be informed by that perspective.
All right, let's go to Alon Mizrahi.
Alon, thank you so much for joining.
It's great to be with you too, Katie and Aaron. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off by asking you about these protests that we've been seeing in Israel. A lot of people are celebrating these protests. They're saying that Jews and Arabs are coming together and they're protesting Netanyahu and defending the hostages and calling for him to make a deal. Let's take a look at this, and then I wanted to know your thoughts on it. Okay. And also you can translate what she's saying, the woman speaking.
הייתם מאמינים שממשלת ישראל תמשיך להפקיר את החטופים? לפי הערכות נשארו רק 50 חטופים חיים. אז אני רוצה לספר לך, אדוני ראש הממשלה, אני אדאג באופן אישי שתשפט על כל נרצח ורצח שקרה ב7 באוקטובר. אני אדאג שאתה תשפט על כל חטוף וחטופה שנחטפו לעזה בחיים וחוזרים משם מתים.
So can you tell us what was happening there and what your thoughts are on it?
Okay, I'll tell you what she says. She says, Netanyahu, I can't believe that you're still leaving Israeli captives to rot in Gaza. And I know that I'm saying it like short. I know you're going to be judged for each and every person murdered on October 7th. Okay, this is what she says, and you can clearly hear the Jewish Israeli focus, right? It's nothing about genocide, casualties, not even like two sides. It's just very focused on the Israeli side. But for context, this wave of demonstrations started before October 7th. It started like well over a year ago. And I have to say that personally, I never attended any of these demonstrations because in not a single one of them did the organizers ever agree to include the issue of Palestine or the occupation. You could not say the word apartheid. If a Palestinian representative wanted to speak about this, they would be censored by the organizers. So this is a stage in Israel at this very late stage in the day of Zionism, of everything we know. You're still not allowed to speak on the central stages of the Zionist, liberal Zionists. And this is very sad. This is very sad and very indicative of how deeply Israel is fucked up politically, and how self-centered Jews have become really in Zionism, which is like what brought us here. These demonstrations are as I see it, because maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but as a radical Mizrahi Jew, an Arab Jew, I see it as a power struggle between two factions of Ashkenazi politics. the right-wing section and the classic liberal Zionist section. But it's a power struggle. It's not a moral conflict. It's not how we go about doing things. It's what kind of image we want for ourselves and who we want to be in power. So there's a great deal of cynicism in it, and of course nationalism and racism, all the things we know so well.
And we're going to ask you more questions about current events in Israel. But just for context and to explain your perspective, can you talk about your personal journey and how you unlearn Zionism and how your perspective as a Mizrahi Jew shaped it? And for people who don't know what Mizrahi Jews are, those are Jews who come from Arab countries.
Mostly, yes. Arab countries, but not only, because there were Jews from Iran, for instance, and from Afghanistan and other countries, but more or less Muslim, Middle East and Maghreb countries, like Morocco and other countries around it. The thing with Zionism is, I mean, it's a long journey, and I can only give some few pointers from it. But the trick with Zionism is, as long as you don't question it seriously from any perspective, I mean, even if you access it from the point of social justice, or from environment, or feminism, or Mizrahi point of view, or the occupation, you can access it from so many different angles. But as long as you don't seriously question it, and you're in Israel, in this bubble, okay, it's a bubble. It's separate from the rest of the world. It speaks a different language. It only echoes certain opinions. So as long as you live in this bubble and you never actively try to burst and see the other side, you won't have any reasons to seriously doubt the story. But once you begin and you have any sense of integrity, then it's a one-way street. So for me, after a personal tragedy, after I lost my brother to a motorcycle accident some 15 years ago, it started the journey of rediscovering myself and the truth in my life. I was always a nonconformist, and I was always didn't like authority and didn't like established stories, and the Israeli, and especially the Mizrahi Ashkenazi story in Israel. But only after my world kind of shattered personally, and I started to rebuilding it, finding the different building blocks and starting to reconstructing it, only then did I begin to really question the basic story of Israeli identity and what it means. And I think the first step in this direction for me was recognizing or acknowledging my own Mizrahiness. I was, for the first time in my life, I was in my late 30s. I was honest with myself, and I was willing to see that, no, I wasn't an Israeli. I was treated differently. I was looked at differently from by teachers in school, in university, by people everywhere. The commercials, the culture, the cinema, everything in Israel speaks this language. But only when you agree to see it, can you read the codes and see that the language speaks differently for different people. And when I was willing to accept that there's no such thing as an Israeli, and the color of your skin as a Jew, I'm still talking as a Jew, the color of your skin is a big factor in how you're perceived and the kind of attributes society allows you to have. My next step was, if this is my story, how do Palestinians feel? Or how do Arabs feel? If I feel strange or a stranger in this society that speaks as if we're one, if I already know this is nonsense, how do Palestinians and Arabs feel? And then I started reading about the actual history of Zionism and Palestine. And it didn't take long for me to get it. That the whole story I was taught was basically a fiction. It has nothing to do with reality. Zionism is 100% fiction. There's not one grain of truth to all of it. The version of history tells people the version of what happened, how people came here and who came here and what they did and what kind of relationships they had with the environments or the Turks, the British. Everything about it is just one big lie. It's unbelievable. The more you read and you learn, you discover another layer and another layer of another lie and another fiction. And it's been like this for me, and I've been doing it like deprogramming or unlearning my Israeli and even Jewish identity. Because maybe we can talk about this also, but I'm in a stage in my life where I question everything. I don't give a fuck about anything. Nothing is sacred for me. Nothing. I mean, people are sacred. Children and babies are sacred, but that's the only thing. The rest, I don't give a fuck about. I'm willing to accept everything I know about anything is a lie, a political lie, brainwashing, propaganda. I'm even embracing this possibility.
What do you think is the problem with Israeli society? Because, this view that every human being is sacred, every child is sacred, that's obviously not shared by most Israelis right now. At least if watching from afar, just all these deaths of Palestinians at the hands of Israel just since October 7th, it doesn't seem to have stirred many people inside Israel to do anything.
I have to tell you about two conversations or parts of conversations I overheard today when I was out. I took my daughter and we traveled a bit, and I didn't eavesdrop, but you get fragments of conversations and other people talk on the train or at a restaurant. And one conversation was 3 people sat at a table and they were talking about a potential war with Lebanon. And one of them said, but if we go into war with Lebanon, it's going to be only 1 week. After 1 week, there's going to be no more Lebanon, and that's it, which made me kind of giggle. But a woman next to this guy said, after October 7, we had like a legitimacy from the whole world to flatten Gaza completely. So why didn't we do it? We missed such an opportunity. Most Israelis, and these are not Ben Gvir voters. These are like normal people with normal jobs and normal lives and normal families. The consensus among that demographic is that Israel missed an opportunity and could have done a lot more in Gaza, which is like it blows. How do you go on about life after hearing this? This is so insane and disconnected. But this is one conversation. The other one I heard was a woman was showing to a group of friends, and I understood it was about Roger Waters because from their reaction and the conversation that ensued, she was showing them what he said, like they denying the mass rape and so on. And they were like, oh no, he's such like a terrible person and he hates us so much. But luckily we have Gilmore to show him and
so
tell him.
That's David Gilmour, who is Roger Waters.
Yeah, Gilmore, the other famous guy from Pink Floyd. Yeah, Israelis still feel the victims in this. Like absolutely 100% of victims in Palestine or Israel are Israelis and Jews. There is no room, there's no space, there's no hypothetical possibility to consider Palestinian victimhood. It doesn't exist at all. And what happened to Israeli society will need to be studied and will be studied, I think, for many decades. I don't think this is something the world has ever seen. A society that has become so corrupt, so widely in a way that is so amazingly detached from reality, like completely. I don't know how you can have conversation with people who have this kind of beliefs. You know, you can have a conversation with someone who believes in capitalism. If he's intelligent, if they're intelligent, maybe you can have a conversation about, I don't know, about some kind of issues, climate and how we should approach it and how big it is. Maybe you can have a conversation. But people who think they are the victims and people who believe they are 100% right and righteous and are completely indifferent, what can you say? What can you say to them? I think that as part of my not giving a fuck about anything anymore, I think that Zionism from the very second it was born began as a very narcissistic and dehumanizing ideological movement. Because what does it mean? I'm going to move millions of people from here to there and tell them this is your story. And what about other people that already live there? I mean, what is this? This is playing monopoly with people, like not caring at all about what's going to happen with them. What's going to be? How is it going to look like? What kind of brutality are you going to have to carry out to allow this to happen? Zionism from the very beginning was, I think we are not, I mean, we, the three of us, and other Jews who are part of this like critical voice, I'm not sure we are even radical enough in the way we define and conceptualize Zionism and how evil it is and how evil it has become. I think that maybe we're still a little bit gentle with this movement. But this is me. I'd love to hear what you think about this.
You know, personally, I grew up attending a Zionist summer camp in North America, and even though I always knew, you know, that it was all the propaganda we were getting about Israel was wrong, I've known that for forever. But I still went to it because it happened to be a part of my family history, and it was just like what we did, even though I had an anti-Zionist father. But I wonder sometimes, did even though I knew what the facts were, did that experience, because I made so many wonderful friends there and have some good memories, did that have a psychological effect of subconsciously making me softer on Zionism? And I don't know the answer to it, and it doesn't really matter when it comes to me personally, but I do think that it is interesting to think about how when you're brought up in a certain culture and there is this ideology that is dominant and it's toxic, and you know, people get steeped in it and then they don't question it because they associate it with their families, with wonderful memories, with their friends. And I do think that that's had, even for Jewish people who are critical of Israel and Zionism in North America, I do wonder sometimes if that is a lingering factor in how we look at Israel. So it's interesting, the point you raise about whether we're still not critical enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up mostly like non-Zionist. Now I consider myself anti-Zionist, but I was raised non-Zionist. I have relatives in Jerusalem, but like my mom's cousins. What was really hard for me to see was how Zionism was not, it was hard for me to accept, even being non-Zionist and somewhat critical of Zionism. It was hard for me to accept that this was a colonial project. And obviously there's something unique about Zionism. There's lots of things that aren't unique about it, but what is unique is that it coincided, obviously, with a certain wave of it coincided with the Holocaust. So it was very hard for me to see it as delinked from that. It was also, I didn't realize that there was this rich history of anti-Zionist Jewry, but the summer camp I went to was actually socialist, not Zionist. It was just a Jewish secular socialist summer camp. But it was, I remember saying to my friend, no, it's not settler colonialism. How could it be settler colonialism when people were fleeing the Holocaust? As if those things are mutually exclusive. And you know, it's what really allowed me to be the like enthusiastic anti-Zionist that I am now, as opposed to a kind of reluctant one, was hearing Miko Peled, because his experience being the son of an Israeli general, being the uncle of someone who was killed in a suicide bombing, it was so eye-opening, and all those arguments, you don't know, you don't live there, it's easy to think this without, hearing the sounds of rockets, all of that was just thrown out.
If we look, if we're courageous, we need to look at Judaism, not only at Zionism. Because this story that we've all been told, that everybody hates us and wants to kill us. And really, the exceptionalism, conformity, and survival are so tied together in Judaism and in Zionism. You're exceptional, you're unlike everybody else. And maybe Jews in America have this like softer, not as harsh as
the chosen people, you mean, or
exceptional. You don't marry other people. You only intermingle with them to a degree. You're not one of them. But for Jews in the U.S., this doesn't like tally. It doesn't make sense. But I think maybe there's a growing paranoia now, and maybe this is something you can also tell me about. But the sense of exceptionalism, that we're not like other people, we are different from the rest of humanity, and we have to somehow barely survive this never-ending attack against us. And we can only survive through conformity, through staying within the tribe and accepting all its beliefs and all its stories. This is so toxic for your consciousness, for how you see life. How can you look at people normally and look at world events normally when this is what you have in mind, that you are not like other people?
Yeah, I think though, when you're looking at an actual religion, there's always like historical and societal things that influence it, right? Like you could look at Christianity and think it's a religion of peace and love, and then you can look at the Crusades, and you have religious Jews who are very Zionist, and then you have religious Jews who are anti-Zionist. But there's definitely, that's an interesting question. Can you just shed more light onto what, like obviously it's not comparable to what Palestinians go through, but I think a lot of people don't even know about this distinction between Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews, and also Sephardic Jews. But can you talk more about the racism, which again pales in comparison to what Palestinians face, but I think it's an illustrative of one of Zionism's problems. But can you talk about the racism faced by Mizrahi Jews, and also where your family came from?
To describe it in a very concise way, every stereotype against brown and black people that you have, like in European societies or in the American society, you have exactly the same in the Jewish world, specifically in Israel. So brown Jews are less intelligent, less sophisticated, less gentle, less trustworthy, more criminal, more dangerous, more sexually depraved. This is all the stereotypes about brown and black people that we know from centuries of colonialism. So we have this about Jews, but one of the really tragic aspects of Zionism that is it's taken the whole umbrella, the whole reach or quilt, if you want to use this word, of Jewish identities, different Jewish stories, communities, cultures, languages, ways of worshiping. It was so rich. Jewish culture was so rich. In Morocco, you had like 50 or 70 or 100 different Jewish communities, with each one with its own like nuanced way of going about stuff, and its own a little bit different musicality to its prayer, which was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And in Yemen and in Iraq and Lebanon and Syria, it's a big part of the world with many different languages and cultures and perspectives. And all of this has been erased. There's nothing remains of it. There's nothing. Mizrahi Jews, Arab Jews did not go through the Holocaust, but culturally it's as if they did. They were wiped out, but by Zionism, not by Germans or by Muslim or Arab forces. And so I think that for Arab Jews, mostly their experience and their expectations from life were very different from Eastern European Jews. They didn't have this sense of impending doom, that we are about to be, our neighbor is going to burn us. I don't know. The villagers are gonna come and stab us. Or I don't know. They didn't have this. They led mostly. It wasn't idyllic. I'm not saying it was. I mean, whose life was perfect. This is another aspect of like Jewish narcissistic telling of history. We suffered, but only us. Black people didn't suffer, and Catholics didn't suffer. Yeah. And I mean, is there any group of people who didn't go through like hell? You live especially if you live in America. I mean, how can you talk about yourself as a victim in the presence of Native Americans? How can you? I mean, what kind of? I mean, you're deranged to me to talk about this. People whose whole civilization has been wiped out completely, whose ancestors were like butchered and massacred, and black people. I mean, this whole narcissistic way of seeing things like we only suffer. This is only about our pain. Only us. We are the only ones knowing pain. This is such bullshit. Such bullshit. And so we are creating politically, Zionism especially, because Judaism could have gone in like different directions. It could have gone more reform and could have become more open and more involved with other people and more accepting of other people and other religions. But Zionism made everything so like closed up and singular. And now you can only be a good Jew if you identify with Zionism and you accept its tenets and you accept the killing of children and women. If you lose all morality and all humanity, now there's only one way to be Jew. Only one way to be Jew, through trauma and brutality and war and all this insanity. So if I'm going back to the Jewish Arab theme, this whole collection of identities and stories was through manipulation, because most Arab Jews did not elect to become Zionists and migrate to Israel. They were manipulated and forced and coerced into doing this by Zionists coming from Palestine or from young Israel to their communities, raising like havoc and chaos and making them feel either uncomfortable or unwelcome, or promising them like delusional stuff, like this is like the Messiah is coming. Bnei Israel are coming back to the Holy Land, and this is our salvation, redemption. This is the moment God promised us. This is what they told those very, very innocent people, not very, just like native tribes in America, or black people in Africa. They didn't have this idea of, I'm going to tell you one thing strategically to get you to do something so I can take over you and your resources. They didn't have this in mind. So they actually believed. They said, well, now we can go to Jerusalem and be part of this like national revival. Yeah, sign us up. Let's go. But then they came to Israel. And I think that the minute that they set foot here, they regretted it, many of them. And there are so many stories about passports being confiscated. They weren't allowed to leave. Some Moroccan Jews had French passports, and they were confiscated from them. They weren't allowed to leave. They were promised, for instance, they promised everyone you're going to go to Jerusalem. But then they sent them to Dimona and Beersheba and Netivot and Shlomi, all the far reaches of, it's the 50s, it's the desert and complete desolation. You have nothing. There's no culture, no mass transportation like normal, hardly electricity. So people who lived in communities that were in place for centuries, like in Marrakesh or Casablanca or Fez, there were Jews like over 1,000 years in Morocco, in different cities. Imagine how deeply rooted in the landscape you feel when this is so how much history you have. But they were uprooted and brought to Dimona, and their community broken because they didn't have their rabbi and leader with them. They were separated. So now they had no leadership, and no political leadership, no religious leadership. They had no one to turn to. And they were told by the Zionist regime, Zionist operatives, that they were ridiculous and primitive people who spoke primitive and ridiculous languages and had very laughable beliefs, Jewish beliefs, right? Innocent Jewish religious beliefs. But they were made fun of. They were called terrible names. Savages, barbarians. In the early days, it was one of the derogatory names for Moroccan Jews was Moroccan knife. Moroccan knife. Like to say that Moroccan Jews stab people because they are criminals. And all these men who came from all these communities who were like small traders, or they had had a shoe shop, or had a stand at the market on, or sold whatever, fabrics. They came here, their whole culture, their whole language, their whole structure, their whole sense of belonging, completely broken, not by choice. And now they are facing this the same machine that we are facing now. And we are mature and educated people, and we've been through stuff. It's the same machine that they faced 60 years ago. So what chance did they have against this kind of propaganda, against this kind of brainwashing? And the Zionist regime back then had total power over every aspect of life in young Israel. You would get medical insurance or a chance at like a decent job if you belong to the right party. They would check it. They would force you to there were like signs, all kinds of stamps you needed to collect to show you belong to the right party to get like normal quality medical care, to be able to get a job if you're unemployed. And they send you to dig trenches or plant trees for kibbutzim, for the Ashkenazi landlords. So people went through, and this subject definitely hasn't been like studied enough. I think that the mental breakdown was immense. It was such a shock for them, from people who came from these organic, very old traditional communities into this mayhem of a country that's in the Middle East, but dreams of being European, dreams of being Western, dreams of speaking Hebrew, but not the kind of Hebrew they speak at the synagogue, with their laughable accent, which is how Hebrew is meant to sound. But this is not the kind of Hebrew you're allowed to speak or supposed to speak. So you need to learn to speak Hebrew like an Ashkenazi. You can't say ha, you can't say ah. But this is how they prayed. This is how their parents and grandparents prayed. This was Hebrew. This is the Bible. This is how you're supposed to read it. But this is how they were not allowed to speak once they set foot in Israel.
And so what is Israel trying to do right now? What is motivating not just Netanyahu, but even the people who are critical of Netanyahu, but who support the genocidal war on Gaza.
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiotspodcast.com.
That was fascinating.
Very grateful to Alon Mizrahi. And again, his last name is Mizrahi, and that's also what he is ethnically. He's also a Mizrahi Jew, someone who comes from a Jewish person who comes from the Middle East, as opposed to, Ashkenazi Israelis who come from Europe, but yet claim to be the indigenous people of the land.
Right.
He actually is his ancestry actually is indigenous to the region.
And it's very weird because there's this simultaneous Israeli cosplay where people like Netanyahu change their name so it sounds more Israeli, but they also are very Ashkenazi and quite racist against Mizrahis. It's a fascinating phenomenon. But all the stereotypes, by the way, about Jews, like liking whitefish, being like Woody Allen or Larry David, all of those things are Ashkenazi cultural signifiers. So Mizrahi Jews are not really represented.
Well, at least, the Ashkenazi Israelis are being consistent. They discriminate against the indigenous Palestinians of the land. So why not also discriminated against the indigenous Jews of the Middle East as well, as Alon talked about. And very grateful to him. And it's hard not to end an interview about Israel, Palestine these days without talking about the apocalypse. And that's what we did. That's where it's at. And hopefully we're not going to see the apocalypse, and we'll be back with him at a later date to talk about how we avoided the apocalypse.
Right. And if you want to hear about the apocalypse, then you can, of course, become subscribers at usefulidiotspodcast.com. And you get not only the full interview with Alon, but you also get Thursday Throwdown, your midweek dose of media madness. And boy, is there a lot of madness this week.
What a great pitch for a podcast. If you want to hear about the apocalypse, sign up for $6 a month at usefulidiotspodcast.com.
Yeah. It's Apocalypse Watch.
Apocalypse Watch. All right. We're very grateful to you for joining us. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For extended episodes, bonus content, and our weekly Thursday Throwdown episode, please subscribe at usefulidiotspodcast.com. Support the show for free by subscribing on YouTube, Rumble, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review. You can also follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod. Thanks for supporting independent media. We'll see you next time.